Point number 4 on how to improve your writing. Use simple words whenever possible. We should always use simple words whenever possible. In my opinion, flowery words and long sentences do not impress most people. We should always remember that our first priority is to inform the audience, not to impress them. If we're writing to show how clever and smart we are, we defeated the purpose. We should be writing to help other people, to glorify Christ, to spread the gospel, to minister to others. And if we're trying to make ourselves look good, we're defeating the entire purpose, the very reason for our writing. So use simple words when possible. Mark Twain is famous for saying, "I get paid by the word, so why would I want to use metropolis when I could get by with city?" And I think that holds true in our writing today. Why use ambivalence when we could say uncertain or fluctuate? Why use audacious when we could just say bold or daring? Why use magnanimous when we could just say forgiving? I certainly agree that there are no true synonyms in the English language. For example, even such words as might and may have different connotations. Some linguistics researchers did a study on might and may and discovered that for most people, might has more of a negative connotation than may. For example, if a mother tells a child that she might let him play outside after a while, that means there's a good chance he won't get to play outside. The linguist went on to discover that if a mother says to a child, "I may let you play outside after a while," then there's a good chance that she's going to let her child play outside. So even such simple words as might and may have different connotations, yet our job as a writer is to communicate to the reader. And most of the time we can communicate effectively by using simple, unadorned language. And once again, we can take an example from Jesus. Jesus used simple, unadorned language. And I especially like the scripture that says, "The common people heard him gladly." Why did they hear him gladly? Because they understood him, because he used language of the common people. Look at this parable of Jesus, the sower. Look through it and see how many words that you can find that are 3 syllables or more. Now, obviously, the translators had some input in this, but I believe that God had his hand on the translators when they made the King James Version so that the common people could hear him gladly, read and understand his word. There was a study done and reported in Science Daily, November issue of 2005. And in the study, they concluded that writers who use long words needlessly and choose complicated font styles are seen as less intelligent than those who stick with basic vocabulary and plain text, according to new research from the Princeton University in New Jersey. So one thing is certain: write as simply and plainly as possible, and it's more likely you'll be thought of as an intelligent writer. Imagine how sad it would be if a minister preached a sermon where he used flowery big words to impress the educated people in the audience, while at the same time there sat on the front row a 10 or 12-year-old who couldn't make sense out of the gospel message because the minister preached above their intellectual level. A professor friend of mine tells a story about how a writer brought her manuscript to him to look over. He looked over the first few pages and finally had to stop, and he said, "Listen, we're both adults here. I don't understand what these 2 people are doing." And in the manuscript, a guy and a girl were sitting on the sofa, both eating pizza. And as the story went on, they began osculating. And the professor turned to the young writer and said, "Look, we're both adults here. I have 3 college degrees, and I do not know what this word osculate means." And she said, "You don't know?" He said, "No." She said, "Well, it means kissing." She said, "Everyone else uses the words kissing and smooching, and I thought I would use something different, so I looked up in the dictionary and I found this word, osculating." And the professor said, "Well, I have learned something. I did not know that." And he picked up the dictionary, and sure enough, the word osculate, it does mean kissing. In fact, it comes from the word used for kissing fish, where they kiss and pass food back and forth from one to another. And he said, "Look, this couple is sitting here eating pizza. I don't think that's the best word to use in this case. Maybe we just better stick with the word kissing." So sometimes just the simple word is the best word. Here's another example along the same lines that we're talking about today, how that a small word will work just as well as a big word if chosen properly. In the American Journal of Economics and Sociology, Joseph Eccleston wrote an editorial explaining how that small words would work quite as well as big words, especially in advertisement. Well, one of the readers wrote back to him, and she said something along the lines of, "I have a master's degree in English, and I feel quite comfortable with using big words, and I think we should use them when we can. Thank you very much." And here's the response that Mr. Eccleston wrote back to her. He titled it, "Big Words Are for the Birds." And notice that every word in this article is only one syllable. When you come right down to it, there is no law that says you have to use big words. There are lots of small words, and good ones, that can be made to say all the things you want to say, quite as well as the big ones. It may take more time to find the small words, but it can be well worth it. For small words are quick to grasp, and best of all, most of us know what they mean. Small words, a lot of them in fact, can say a thing just the way it should be said. They can be crisp, brief, to the point. Or they can be soft, round, and smooth, rich with just the right feel, the right taste. Use them with care, and what you say can be slow or fast to read, as you wish. Small words have a charm all their own. The charm of the quick, the lean, the light on the toes. They dance, twist, turn, sing, light the way for the eyes of those who read, like sparks in the night, and stay on to sing more. Small words are clean, the grace notes of prose. There is an air to them that leaves you with the keen sense that they could not be more clear. You know what they say, the way you know a day is bright and fair at first sight. And you know as you read that you like the way they say it. Small words are sweet to the ear, to the tongue, and the mind. Small words are gay and lure you to their song as the flame lures the moth, which is not a bad thing to do. Small words have a world of their own, a big world in which all of us live most of the time. And small words can catch big thoughts and hold them up for all who read to see, like bright stones in rings of gold. In fact, if you play your cards right, you can write ads the way they all say ads should be done, in words like these, of just one syllable. So I think that's a good piece of writing, and it certainly demonstrates how you can have good writing and still use small words that everyone can understand in an instant. We had a young evangelist come to our church and preach several nights of revival. And he was a good evangelist, but every night he would use some big word in his sermon. And I followed along in his sermon trying to focus until he used this big word. And 30 seconds or a minute later, while he had moved on in his sermon, I was still thinking about the big word and what it meant. The big words were kind of a stumbling block. And I thought it was just me, and then after the revival was over, I mentioned it to someone else, and they agreed that the big words bothered them. So we mentioned it to the pastor, and the pastor told us that the man would go out for a walk every day and take his dictionary with him, and he would look in the dictionary and find some word that he liked, and he would determine that that night he was going to use that word in his sermon at some point. Well, I guess there was nothing wrong with that. The only thing is, he lost some of us by using those big words. And it made it difficult for us to focus because we were still thinking about the big word. So I guess the point is, if the words you use draw focus to themselves, then we probably shouldn't use them if we're trying to be persuasive or inform others, because the words will become distracting.